It's Ash from Super Videos, back for another video for The Walking Dead. With The Walking Dead's original series finally over, I will be doing a bunch of ranking videos for the series. This is going to be the first one of those, and in this one we're going to be taking a look at the best moments of the series. Now, I'm not going to go through and give you like 100 best moments or anything like that, because I don't want this video to be super long, but I also couldn't come down to just 10 best moments, so I decided to give you a 20 best moments of the series in my opinion. Now, after this video, stay tuned for other ranking videos just like this. I won't be doing them weekly, but I will be doing a few of these in the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for all of those. So stay tuned, we'll be right back with my list of 20 best moments of the Walking Dead series. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's get right into it. Now, I'm not going to go through these in order in terms of which I think is better or not better. I'm going to go through these in the order that they appeared on the show as far as which episode they were in. So first, the moment in Season 1, Episode 1, which has become one of the most iconic scenes in the Walking Dead franchise, and that scene is obviously Rick Grimes riding into an abandoned post-apocalyptic Atlanta. This obviously is the single most famous scene of The Walking Dead because it's obviously on the poster for Season 1, and also it's one of the most iconic scenes in the comic book as well. Next, we have the scene in the same episode where Glenn and Rick are using the guts trick to get through the walkers. Now, aside from this visually being awesome with the rain, the slow motion and everything, it was also the very first time fans were seeing the guts trick in action, so that was definitely super awesome. Next up, we go to Season 2, Episode 8, called Nebraska, and the scene we're talking about is obviously the very famous and gut-wrenching scene where Sophia that has turned, walks out of the barn. This was probably one of the most devastating scenes in the history of The Walking Dead, and aside from Sophia walking out of the barn, Carol's reaction was also the icing on the cake and what made this scene super awesome and super impactful. Next, we stay on Season 2, but we go to Season 2, Episode 12, episode called Better Angels, and this scene has to do with Shane's final moment in the series before his death. This was definitely one of the most shocking and I would say most gut-wrenching scenes of the history of The Walking Dead as well, where Rick kills Shane, and subsequently when Carl Grimes walks in, he finds Shane turned and kills him to save his father. Next up, we go to Season 3, Episode 4, called Killer Within. This scene has to do with Lori's death, which was one of the most gut-wrenching and I would say heartbreaking scenes of the history of The Walking Dead as well. Even though this scene by itself was great, the scene that came after it with Carl Grimes walking out and Rick learning about Lori's death was also as gut-wrenching, and I think that added a lot more layers to the story, to the scene, and it made that whole thing even better. Next up, we go to Season 3, Episode 15, This Sorrowful Life, and the scene that we are talking about is Merle turning into a walker and Daryl Dixon finding his brother and having to put him down. One of the most heartbreaking scenes for Daryl's character in the series. Next up, we go to Season 4, Episode 8, Too Far Gone. The scene in question is Hershel's death scene, where the governor slashes his throat and cuts off his head. This was one of the most, I would say, violent and impactful, gut-wrenching scenes of this series as well. And on top of that, it was Rick's speech that made that scene even more powerful and made that scene even more impactful for the audience. Next up, we go to season 4, episode 14, episode called The Grove. This scene has to do with Carol shooting Lizzie in the head because she was too far gone. She was just twisted in the head. Obviously, this is the infamous Look at the Flowers scene, one of the most gut-wrenching and heartbreaking scenes of the history of The Walking Dead as well, and one that really gets you because there's obviously a kid involved. Next up, we go to the end of season 4, episode 16, episode called A, and that scene has to do with Joe's group attacking Rick, Michonne, Carl, and Daryl, and Rick having to rip Joe's throat out in order to save his son. One of the most powerful, shocking, exciting, weird, super awesome scenes of the history of The Walking Dead, and one that I absolutely love up to this point as well. And this was one of the moments where Rick was at his most brutal, most savage that we've ever seen him. And on top of that, the icing on the cake for that scene was the aftermath with Daryl and Rick talking, with Rick saying, "You're my brother," to Daryl. Next up, we go to season 5, episode 1, episode called No Sanctuary. And the scene we're talking about is the scene where Gareth is just about to kill someone from the group. I think it was Glenn that they were going to kill first, but obviously Carol shows up and saves the day. This was one of the most brutal, one of the most shocking scenes of the history of The Walking Dead as well. And I think at that point, there was less plot armor on the characters, so fans were definitely at the edge of their seats because any of our survivors could have been killed. And the way that they did that scene with the setup of it all and how it all came together was definitely super awesome, and it elevated that scene significantly. Next up, season 5, episode 3, episode called Four Walls and a Roof. The scene in question is the scene where Rick brutally attacks and kills Gareth and his people in the church. This was one of the most brutal, savage, satisfying scenes of the history of The Walking Dead, and this was another scene where Rick was at his most savage and brutal in the series. Next up, we go to season 6, episode 9, episode called No Way Out, and the scene we're talking about is Carl Grimes getting shot in the face, losing his eye. Now, the scene itself, as shocking as it wasn't the only thing that made me put this scene in this list, but also everything surrounding what happened, as far as everything leading up to him getting shot, and then after that, the aftermath, Rick Grimes killing the walkers the way he did, everyone coming together, leading to Rick's speech. And I would say that this is arguably the best episode of this series as well, but for the sake of this video, Carl Grimes getting shot in the face is also another one of my favorite moments of this series because of what it represented and how it came together and how shocking it was. Even though it was in the comics, it was still devastating, and I would say as shocking to comic fans as it was for non-comic fans. Next up, season 6, episode 16, Last Day on Earth, with Negan's introduction. Now, everything about Negan's introduction was perfection. It's one of the scenes where I still, up to this point, to this day, watch, or I should say rewatch and enjoy. The only thing that made this scene lose a few points as far as how great it was Negan being censored, and also the cliffhanger that they put at the end of Negan's introduction made this episode lose a lot of its greatness. But even with that, this scene still has to be one of the best of the series. Next, we go to season 7, episode 1, the very next episode after Negan's introduction. This episode was called The Day Will Come When You Won't Be. Now, the scene in question is not necessarily the scene with Negan killing Glenn or Abe or threatening to cut Carl's arm off or anything like that. The moment is at the very end where all of the survivors are sitting in a circle. They're at their lowest and they're just watching the blood on the ground. one of the most powerful, impactful, and gut-wrenching scenes of the series. And I would say the icing on the cake for this scene was what happens after, with Rick going to the RV and with the zoom in on Rick's face, seeing his eyes, the way they were and everything. Next up, Season 7, Episode 10, New Best Friends. This is the only moment I have in the entirety of the season, and I don't have anything for Season 8, because those two seasons, in my opinion, were the worst seasons of The Walking Dead. But this scene that we're talking about in Season 7, Episode 10 is the scene with Rick having to fight Winslow the Walker. One of the most awesome scenes of The Walking Dead for horror and zombie fans. Next up, we go to Season 9, Episode 5, episode called What Comes After. And the scene that we're talking about is obviously Rick Grimes, quote-unquote, sacrificing himself to save everyone. But it wasn't just that scene alone. It was Michonne, Daryl, Maggie's reactions to seeing Rick the way that he was, thinking that he died, was definitely powerful, and it made that scene one of the best scenes of Season 9 and one of the best scenes of the history of The Walking Dead. Now, even though Negan's cameo at the very end of the series finale doesn't make the cut in my list, I do want to put it as an honorable mention. His cameo in Season 11, Episode 24, called Rest in Peace. The only reason I didn't put this alone by itself is because it was in a post-credit scene, and also it just scratched the surface of what we should have got. You know what I mean? Like, if we got an extended Rick scene that I absolutely loved, I would have put more attention and shine on that scene. But because of the way that it was, I'm just going to put it on top of his final episode itself. Next up, we go to Season 9, Episode 15, episode called The Calm Before, and the scene in question is the reveal about the characters that were killed by Alpha with their heads cut off, decapitated, and put on pikes in a field for everyone to see. Everyone's reaction to seeing the heads on the pikes, especially Carol's, made this scene one of the best scenes of the history of The Walking Dead. I would say arguably the most gut-wrenching and saddest scenes of the history of The Walking Dead as a whole. Next up, we go to Season 10, Episode 12, Walk With Us. This scene in question is Alpha's death scene, Negan killing Alpha. This was the most shocking and satisfying scenes of The Walking Dead. The reason why I say shocking is because of the way it came together. Because for comic fans, we were expecting it, but the way it came together was definitely a surprise, and I absolutely loved it. Next up, we go to Season 10, Episode 22, one of the bonus episodes of Season 10, the episode called Here's Negan, with Negan's backstory, and the scene in question is Negan finding Lucille, his wife, as a walker, and having to put her down. So this was definitely one of the most powerful, gut-wrenching scenes of the series, and I would say one of the most powerful scenes surrounding Negan's character. And last but not least, we have this scene in Season 11, Episode 22, episode called Faith, the scene with Negan sacrificing himself to save the group. Obviously, Negan didn't die, and things didn't turn out that way, but still, the impact of the scene was there because of Negan's intention and how everything came together. Now, I would say the icing on the cake for this was Negan and Maggie's conversation after about this. Now, even though I do think that those two scenes should have been closer together, instead of having the conversation between Negan and Maggie in the series finale, they should have put it closer to this episode where this scene was. But still, I would say that those two things complement each other. But that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go through. I hope you enjoyed this. I am interested to know your list. What are your favorite moments of the series? Share yours in the comment section below. And also, don't forget, we're going to have a few more of these ranking videos in the next few weeks. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.